And we're back. Tanner, tell me a little bit about your high thought.
Absolutely. So I'm going to get a little bit on my cannabis historian soapbox for a minute. I've been smoking a little bit, so I apologize, but hear me out. There's a game called Civilization. It's a computer game. Walks you through, as it sort of names, civilization. You get to start out in the early days of human history, work your way through as the French or the Greeks or whatever culture you want to be. They are coming out with their next version of the game in February, and they're starting to roll out what the resources of that game are. In essence, what kind of things from the planet are valuable enough to put in the game as something that, like, you want to collect this. Like, oh, bananas, gotta collect those. Valuable stones, whatever be it, you gotta collect those.
Coffee beans?
Coffee beans. How did you know? Absolutely. Coffee beans, another big one in the game. And this is just an open letter to the creators of the game, to anyone listening, that hemp ought to be included as one of the Earth's most valuable resources. Now, I'm just going to get on my soapbox for a second. Cannabis was actually one of the first things that we as people ever started cultivating. Going back to the early days of us not just finding plants, but putting them into the ground and growing them, cannabis was one of the first things that we used to do that. Cross culture, we used it for food, we used it for medicine, we used it for textiles. Cannabis is one of those plants that has so many different uses. You can find it in East Asia, you can find it in France, you can find it in Americas, you can find it in basically every part of the world that has growing plants. Even northern parts of Asia that don't get a ton of sunlight, cannabis has adapted, and that's where we get autoflower plants that come from. I really think that cannabis is something that need to be included in video games as a valuable resource. And I know people are saying, but the kids play this game. But guys, hemp is one of those things that sure could be used in ways that are not great. Wheat could be used in a way to create alcoholic beverages, but we don't put it in the video game for that. But hemp is one of those resources that people have gone to war over, people have traveled to new lands for, and it ought to be given its rightful place at the throne with coffee, with bananas, with wheat, with any other thing that comes from our earth.
It's a global
Cannabis
cheat code. Yes.
Absolutely. So if you're listening, creators of Civilization, could you put weed into my favorite game? That'd be cool.
Please do.
Yeah, please do.
For Civilization.
For Civilization, you gotta do it.
See, now I'm just picturing like a giant pot leaf in Mario Kart.
Ooh, yeah. I
don't
think
know how that would fit into the licensing for Nintendo.
you could just throw it at one of the carts and it just slows them down a little bit. They just drive like
delayed
10
reaction
below the
times.
speed limit. Yeah.
Yoshi could run on hemp diesel.
Yeah. All right, enough about video games. Steve, what have you been thinking about if you've been smoking this week?
Yeah, so I've been filling up this jar, and it's full of AVB. Are you familiar with AVB?
Oh, yeah, but for people who don't know, what is AVB?
AVB is already vaped bud. And so after I vape, I have already vaped bud. And I put it into a jar and I empty my Storz and Pickle device and I refill it, I repack the vape. And I'm starting to get to the 3/4 mark on my jar where I'm going to need to make a decision on what I do with this already vaped bud. And so I want to put it out to the audience and the listeners. If you have any good recipes for to make something out of my already vaped bud, hit me up, drop me a line. I want to be productive I want to be sustainable with my consumption habits.
Okay, I like that. I'll put out my thoughts, but then please drop them in the comments on what Steve should be doing. I used to, in the old days, have a cracker, put a little bit of peanut butter on it, put my already vaped weed in, sort of mix it into the peanut butter, and then a little bit of cayenne on top. Another cracker. It's not great, but
Is
not
is
terrible.
it considered hemp once it's on the cracker?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's yeah. So yeah, drop in the comments. How should Steve eat his already vaped weed? That's a good question.
Thank you. I wouldn't have thought of it without you.
There you go. Jordan, you're behind the camera, but I gotta ask you, what have you been thinking about if you've been smoking this week?
Well, okay, so this came about because my car and my phone, if my car is set to Bluetooth audio connectivity, like when I turn the car on, it just starts auto-playing music from my phone. And it's not like at the beginning of a song. It just picks a random song from a random album, and starts at like 24 seconds in. And I don't know why. I don't
Okay.
understand the interface. But I realized that the majority of the time that this happens, it lands on a Pink Floyd song. And that got me thinking, I was like, why do I have so much Pink Floyd actual like owned music downloaded to my Apple Music app that I don't use ever? And then I was like, okay, why do I love Pink Floyd so much? It got me thinking, it's like, I love Pink Floyd from about 10 or 11 years old. I came to Pink Floyd before I even knew what Cannabis was. And that got me thinking about you guys, and maybe a question to the audience. It's like, what was something maybe that happened or that you experienced when you were growing up that you now know in hindsight is like kind of ancillarily cannabis culture related?
For sure.
But you just knew intrinsically, you're like, oh, I love this thing. Like, I love it for this reason. And then you're like, oh,
What?
now, yeah, I have every single Pink Floyd album in multiple forms. And that's because from 10 years old until, like, I listen to Pink Floyd weekly, and that makes me sound like, yeah, obviously the biggest, like, stereotypical cannabis user.
Classic
but it's
stoner,
like,
man.
but I got there the reverse way.
What did you try before weed that got better with weed? Is sort of the question.
Well, no, and it wasn't even that. It was more like you kind of associate Pink Floyd with like stoner psychedelia. Like it's just like I didn't know what psychedelia was when I was 10 years old. I didn't know. So it's like, were there any things that you were naturally attracted to or gravitated towards as a younger person that you had no idea was like kind of culturally associated with cannabis?
I actually have a good story for this one.
Yeah.
So incense is mine. I think are so like integrated into like cannabis culture because I had a cool uncle who used to give me incense as like a gift for different holidays, and I was like, this is awesome.
Wow.
Come to grow up as an adult. Total stoner. And so it was cannabis culture that probably brought me those incense. But as a 10-year-old, I didn't know that. I just thought like, wow, this smells really cool.
Yeah.
Why don't my parents want me burning this house? I don't know.
No, yeah, that's a really good high thought, Jordan.
Thank you.
A high note.
But it's like, because I have every single Pink Floyd song ever, I just, my car just keep picking it. And then I realized, statistically speaking, Pink Floyd makes up 70% of the music on my actual like downloaded device. And I'm like, oh, okay.
I had that same problem when I turned my car on, and it plays the most popular song that you've ever played within your Apple Music. So
Wow. There we go. See, and I have the opposite problem where I just like plug it into the USB port in my car. It doesn't have Apple Play. And it chooses the first song alphabetically.
Yes.
So I have like a car startup song that I plug it in, and it's always the same, and I get like 10 seconds in before I pause it.
And is that Apple Music?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's an Apple Music thing. Steve Jobs would never.
I don't know why my car is like, even though Spotify is open and the most recent app I've used,
Yes.
I'll get into my car and it's like, let's dig through this guy's music collection from when he was 12 years old. And let's pick one.
That's hilarious.
I don't get it.
I dig it, man. I dig it.
So yeah, I would put that out to the listening audience. What is something that you now realize in hindsight?
Cannabis related or of the
Cannabis,
culture.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, I'm sure I was walking around to the 6th grader with like my Grateful Dead shirt on, and there were enough adults that were like, I don't know about that.
Exactly.
I like it.
Well, thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah. It's been another episode.
Yeah.
We'll be back in your feeds next week. We're coming out on Tuesdays, sticking to that regular schedule. Really love to be able to be at that front part of the week, sharing news, being able to connect with people. So make sure to check those feeds, check that YouTube every Tuesday.
It's like when the albums dropped back in the day.
Exactly. But of course, in the meantime, you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on LinkedIn, you can find us on TikTok, Twitter, wherever. Just go on there, look for Northern Lights, look for Minnesota Cannabis College, look for Canna Connect, look for Dabbler Depot. Got a lot of awesome people to help to make the show possible, and we'd love to connect with you online.
Yeah, shout out to the Seed and Sesh. Come out tonight and check out their home grow. It's every Tuesday at the Dabbler Depot Seed and Sesh on Payne Avenue.
Well, I've got some more gummies to eat, so we're going to wrap this episode up. But thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you again back next week.
Peace.